Hi, I'm Robin Farber, and as Gordon mentioned, I'm an executive coach and a psychotherapist, and I love working with Loeb Leadership. They are doing so many great things, and I love being a part of their organization. I've been in private practice for over 30 years, and I deal with anxiety, depression, PTSD, addictions, loss, and a whole host of other issues. Now, in all my years in helping people through grief and loss, I have never seen this type of collective grief as the one that's been described as like a mass trauma. We all have been feeling embattled by this pandemic. And in many ways, some of us feel like we're being held hostage with all of these restrictions until there's some type of treatment or vaccine. We've lost, as people mentioned at the beginning, and the predictability in our lives. People mentioned they're feeling tired, they're feeling helpless, they're worried, and they're worried about our freedoms for the future. So what adds to this feeling of having the blues is that the social separation that we have to practice is actually the key to fighting this virus, which keeps us away from the people we feel supported by. Now, I'm hoping that you are fortunate, you're sheltering at home, your loved ones are healthy, you're not grieving any loss of life. But you may still wonder, why am I still feeling blue? Well, this feeling you're having may be grief. And the reason why it's grief is that grief is triggered by other kinds of losses. And some of those losses, some people have experienced in their workplace, some people have been laid off, they've been demoted, they've lost their jobs. The social distancing also is a loss because it prevents us from just moving around freely like we like. The losses of milestones and rites of passage, whether it's weddings, graduations, proms, you name it, things have been canceled. I know for me, I feel the loss of things that I had planned. I'm going to concerts that I had tickets for, Broadway performances. Some people are grieving the loss of the sports seasons and vacations. So the other rites of passage, we just assumed that we would all have the ability to do, as we always have, is like gathering for a funeral, being there for our loved ones. And the insult to injury on all that is that when you've lost a loved one and you have been infected by this virus, it even prevents you from being either in the hospital with them or when they are buried. A lot of people can't even go to the funerals. So these are all kinds of losses that are very painful. College students are grieving loss of a spring semester. I know, like, my own daughter had to come home early, and now we're wondering about the fall. That's a loss. Loss of financial stability, as we know, it's all over the news, is happening everywhere. People are anxious, they're worried, some have trouble paying their rent, their mortgages, utilities, and other bills. The long road of grieving is daunting. We don't know when this will end, but I want you to remember that we will get there eventually. It takes time. You will find your balance. Today's workshop is about providing you with 5 core concepts, and these concepts are going to help light the way so that you can learn to manage your expectations and figure out how to deal with all the grief. In our first poll, and I'd like to talk to you first about how you're feeling. The 5 core concepts of forgiveness, gratitude, connections, self-care, and compassion are what we're going to be talking about. But I want to hear first about how you're managing it. I know Gordon asked for one word. I'd also like to find out how you're mostly dealing with the uncertainties of today. And Lana is going to put the poll on so I can get a feel from you and see how you're doing.
Please engage the poll if you can.
Yes, please. Please answer. Thank you. This helps me as a therapist and a coach. It helps me to know how you're doing so I can help you. Okay,
Robin, we have about almost everybody.
perfect.
Okay, I'm going to end the poll now. And that's the results of the poll.
Thank you. So what you can see here is that we are all unique in how we deal with grief. It depends. There's a lot of factors that go into how you're managing it. And basically, your tolerance level is your own unique thing. If you answered A, and you are sharing your feelings with people you trust, and you are much better to face life's uncertainties by sharing. If you've answered B and you're expressing your feelings through journal writing or other creative ways, this is a great way to stay positive through these creative expressions. If you've answered C and you're feeling that all this uncertainty is making you anxious and you're just trying to ignore it, this is very, very common because when people try to avoid these feelings, but unfortunately it goes in the other direction, they tend to worry more. And so it's important not to run away from the discomfort and learn how to manage your feelings, because otherwise they'll just keep resurfacing and you'll be worse off in the long run. If you find, like I could see someone answered here, D, that you're drinking more or overindulging, it's very, very common to indulge if you find that you're especially intolerant of the stress of uncertainty. But look to the answers that people gave in A and B and try on track. Okay, so let's move on to, and by the way, if you answered C, I forgot to mention, if you're excited about getting to work, it's great. It's a great way to recognize your own power and feeling good and finding that joy before you actually start working. You remember what that feeling is like and you tap into it. Remembering that we all grieve differently. There's no right and wrongs, depending on your tolerance. Sometimes you'll feel shock or disbelief or guilt, but it's all correct. There's no right and wrongs to this. As we move on to our first core concept, forgiveness, we want to hear a little bit more about how you're managing. The poll that's going to be put up by Lana is with the question, what's the most likely way in which grief, sadness, anxiety, and general stress might be impacting your work performance? Please answer the poll so I can get a sense of how you're doing. Wow, that came right up, the burnout. Wow.
We have a couple more people. Okay, I'm going to end the poll and I will share the results.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for answering. You also answered very quickly. If you're feeling unmotivated and you answered A and you're having a hard time concentrating, remember it's very, very normal to feel unmotivated and have difficulties at this point. But when we're talking about forgiveness, and why does this mean something when it comes to having the lack of motivation? A lot of times they don't recognize that they're not allowing themselves to have the feelings. So it stands in the way. And the feelings like sadness, fear, worry, anger, and anxiety, they prevent you from actually moving ahead. And they get in the way because you're not forgiving yourself and allowing them to happen. If you've answered B and you find you're working too many hours, like a lot of people I speak with, and you're burning out, this is so common, especially in today's remote working. People feel pressured. A lot of them feel that they have to prove their abilities. and they're working day and night, and home life and work life is all bleeding into one another. Try and separate your personal and professional life, because what ends up happening is that working too much and burning out ends up having you spiral downward, and that can be dangerous. If you've answered C and you find yourself pulling away from colleagues and you're stopping, responding, remember, just mentioned before, this is what happens when people have trouble forgiving themselves. Some people are embarrassed, they feel weak, they feel uncertain, and they don't want to show it. So they just stop responding. This shuts down the opportunities for people to help you and for you to help them. Just try to lean in to opening up more, and this will help you to get your footing again, I promise you. If you've answered D and you're detaching from the stress and you're focusing on your work, this is when it is actually good to compartmentalize stress. Because when you're focusing on your work and you love it, it's a great positive distraction. As long as you're setting those boundaries, it's a very satisfying silver lining and something you can control. So forgiving yourselves and others give you the capacity to support one another. And I'd like to now move on to something else that helps you get through the grief, and that's the second core concept, and that's gratitude. Gratitude is something I am hoping that you're finding somewhere in this land of uncertainty. And of course, as a therapist and a coach, I want to hear from you and see how you're doing.
Robin, did you want to go to the next slide?
Yes, we're going to go to the next slide.
Awesome. And I'm going to launch the poll. Again, we ask if everybody could please participate.
Thank you so much. The question is, what best describes your ability to find gratitude during the quarantine? And see if you can answer to the best of your abilities. Wow, it's good to hear.
Okay, we're just waiting for a couple more responses. Okay, Robin, I'm going to end the poll and share the results.
Wow, I'm so glad to see that people are not finding that they're gloomy, that they're dealing with the adversities. That's wonderful. So if you've answered to B and you feel like you're doing pretty good with your self-care and your gratitude, then, oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
We have a few people that answered B and mostly C.
Okay. Okay, if you feel like you're answering and you're feeling short-tempered and irritable and you don't like talking about your fears for the future and you're isolating, do your best to talk to people. Lean in, talk to people, open up, and do your best to find ways to think about what's good and what's going well in your life. And if you're doing pretty good with your self-care and your coping strategies, this is the best way for you to get your balance and find that you can move on. And this is a great way to feel that, that everything is going to be better. So looking away from the negative and into the positive actually helps you. So showing gratitude is so beneficial. You'll reap the benefits. If you find that positivity, it's all contagious. Try to find ways to show gratitude. Give out the compliments to yourself, to others. I know for me, when I say, wow, I get out, or I got this work done, it feels good. Give out those compliments. Be sincere. And that includes things, even if it's virtual. Give that eye contact. Show that you appreciate them. Be thoughtful. And even volunteering for unpleasant tasks will help you. So when you're expressing your gratitude with good attitude, you deepen your relationships and you learn how to connect with people that are struggling with losses. But I want to talk with you about how it's how to connect in the workplace. This is one of the places talk about how the complications and the challenges of connecting with people who are grieving in their workplace can be done, even if it is challenging. Okay, now we're moving on to connect. This is the next strategy. And I want to know how, and please again, answer this poll, that colleague that's had a loss. Wow.
All right, Robin, most of the people have answered those questions.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I love seeing here what I'm seeing in this poll, because if you're not avoiding and you're addressing it, you recognize that not saying the wrong thing or saying nothing is so much saying something. Any kind of communication, as long as you're expressing yourself well and you're acknowledging people, anything goes. I'm so sorry for your loss. You're in my thoughts and prayers. I can't imagine what it's like to be in your shoes, but anything conveys something better than nothing. Very often people think, and I'm so glad to see nobody here has answered this, that if they say something wrong, they'll make somebody's pain worse. But in actuality, when people aren't acknowledged, their pain increases. So if you're like many of us and you just want to recognize that their pain. And so it's also important to pay attention and figuring out how to connect with others when they are good at hiding their pain. Learn what to look for. And this is a way for you to connect with your colleagues. And even if it's virtual, and sometimes when it's virtual, it's harder, but we have to pay attention more. Look for those cues. People are often hiding. You may be one of those that, you don't really show how you're really feeling the stress. So the signs you want to look out for are when you see somebody that looks especially tired, or they're feeling that you can see they're not concentrating. Some people are more irritable and lack motivation, looking for other signs of depression. Sometimes you'll see people crying. Other people, when they've had a loss, come right back to work and they get back into their routine. But if that's the way they feel comfortable in getting back to a regular life, it's important not to judge them. Particularly in our work environments, this prevents an escalation of problems. And you want to prevent any kind of smoldering crisis. For supervisors, it gets a little bit more daunting, but it's important to be transparent. Just have that frank conversation. If you've known that somebody's had a loss or they seem to be struggling, ask them, how are you handling the work? What tasks do you feel up for? Many companies try to ride things out and just ignore it and hope it goes away. But it's important to get out there and be supportive, be clear, open your door, maintain confidentiality. Obviously, it's a virtual door, but nevertheless, it's important to be open. Ask them, do they need to take less responsibilities right now? Whatever they need, it's important to be clear. So in helping your grieving employee, there may be policies or referral sources you can get them to. The important thing is that you're paying attention. When someone's underperforming assistance, it's important to talk to them about that. If somebody is in mourning and they're not underperforming, they go under the radar. So it's important for all of us, check in with your employee. It may be at first weekly, then every other week, once a month. Just connect. And that's the way, it's the most important thing, is to maintain those connections, especially in our isolated virtual world. So don't, obviously we're talking about your workplace, but don't forget to connect with your family and friends. As a manager, this is very tough. You're doing it at home, you're doing it with your employees. It's very, very draining. So we're going to move on to the next strategy now, and we're going to talk about why it's so important, if you're going to connect, to make sure that self-care comes first and what that looks like. And we're going to move on to that next core concept.
7 minutes left. And just for folks, Robin might go slightly longer, but we will be recording this and sending you the recording. So if you have to jump off at the half hour, feel free to do so, and we will get the recording to you.
Okay, thank you so much, Jordan. Of course, I want to hear from you. So we're going to do a poll, and I'm going to find out from you. Please tell me how the coronavirus quarantine has been affecting you emotionally and physically with your self-care.
Rob, we're just waiting for a few more folks to complete. Okay, we have answers from most of our participants.
Thank you, Lana. Thank you.
Share the results.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, so I can see that people are feeling really fatigued. It's so normal, and having trouble concentrating and focusing on normal tasks. You're working in your home, it's challenging. So very often, what also gets in the way, not only the complications of working from home, is that people are not prioritizing their self-care. You have to find a reason to get out of bed every morning and do something pleasurable, something that makes you feel like you can look forward to it. Sometimes it's a virtual date. I know that many people are reaching out for coffees or lunches with their coworkers. Just laugh or forget even for a moment. Now, if you've answered B, you have to remember that it's so important. And as I can see that people are actually feeling calmer, and I hear this all the time, that working from home for many people helps them feel centered on their personal life. I know for me, it's a little bit easier juggling two worlds. And these are the silver linings. And hopefully the companies, and I'm hearing this all the time, they're seeing how effective it is for people to work from home. And they are looking to create more of a balance, which is great. So not only does this give you control of your life, working remotely, but many people are getting to their bucket lists, which is wonderful, and recentering themselves in their relationships with their children or with their partners. If you're working from home and you've got kids, it's challenging, or you have extra people in the house, but find a way to do something that makes you feel like you could take care of yourself. Now, if you're feeling angry and irritable, try to do things to counterbalance the stress from overindulging. Do the activities, read, garden, go for a walk, exercise. I can't say it enough. It's going to help you with the overindulging. It's going to help you with stress, help you with sleep. So I want to move on to the last core concept, and I'm hoping you pay attention to that, self-care. And the last one is about self-care, but it's another part of it, and that's having compassion. Having compassion for yourself, having compassion for yourself and others. So in the last poll, I want you to tell me a little bit more, and Lana, we're going to do the last one, poll 6. Is we're going to talk about, and I'm hoping you can find a way to take what you've learned here and recommit for your self-care, and let me know where you're at here.
Okay, I'm going to end the poll and share the results.
Thank you so much. Thank you for answering, and I appreciate you responding as to where you want to go on this journey. It's an imperfect one, and if you've answered A or B, I could see most people are out with A. These are challenging times. Just be sympathetic to your own pain. Revisit these challenges over and over again. The concepts are not a straight line. They're meant to revisit. Sometimes we fall off the wagon on self-care, or we're forgetting to look for the gratitude, or we're not forgiving ourselves. Revisit it. If you find that you're struggling, I'm not seeing anybody struggling here, but if you see someone else struggling, please tell them to look for outside resources. There's so much out there. Sometimes people have fragile support systems and they need that compassion to say, hey, I see you're struggling. So, folks, the world as we know it may never be the same, but hopefully we'll get back to a place, and we will. But if you've lost a loved one, or you just feel that loss of the control and the uncertainty and the predictability, just know that if you're feeling the blues sometimes, you may be grieving. That's what this is. And just get back to the 5 core concepts and ground yourself again. It will light up the road and you'll feel like you're struggling less. Give yourself permission to go through the grief. You can't go around it. You have to acknowledge it, go through it in order to get to a better place. So forgive yourself, find gratitude, practice self-care, and please be compassionate. Remember, don't despair. Keep walking, find that resilience inside of you, and you will find a way for things to be brighter and lighter eventually.
Hey, Robin, can I add a couple things? I'm sorry. So appreciate that, Robin. And grief has a real profound impact on performance and relationships. And, you know, Robin showed you a couple different levels of grief, or how to deal with grief in lots of different ways, but recognizing that it might affect your performance based on where you are and how you're feeling and dealing with the grief, and the people around you as well, being cognizant that people are going through different things in different ways. People that you're leading are going through different things differently as well. So it's very important to understand that if somebody's work performance is being affected, it might be because of a grieving process. It might be other issues as well, but it might be that grieving process. And there are certain ways that you can potentially talk to that person or help that person through the process as you understand the 5 core concepts, to help yourself and to help those that are, you know, in a performance scenario. But the real part is connecting, find out where they are. And also same thing with relationships. We have to be more open to talking with everybody and to understanding where they are in this grief process. It changes daily because the world is changing daily, but to have those core concepts behind you of how to understand grief and how to deal with it makes a big difference.
Thank you, Gordon. I would like for any of you, I know we're at the bottom of the hour, feel free to email me. If you have any questions, anything that you would like a little bit more personal time in, please don't hesitate to email. And certainly you're welcome to email Gordon and ask and inquire about whatever you need.